Kirk, you need the video. To share the video.
Welcome, everybody, to this Promise Keepers Canada live streaming event. My name is Kirk Giles. I'm the president of Promise Keepers Canada, and it is just a thrill to be able to be joining you tonight, wherever you may be watching us. You can see that my face looks really red and kind of yellow. It's because I was having some lighting issues literally 2 minutes before we came on the air. So I get to have the best suntan I've had in years tonight as we have this live stream event. And so I'm really excited to be on with you tonight. Some of you are here and maybe you're not familiar at all with Promise Keepers Canada. Let me just tell you quickly who we are. We are a ministry focused on equipping men for a life of purpose and godly impact. We're all about trying to build up and encourage men to follow Jesus and be great men of God. Many of you men are already joining us and you're very familiar with us already. I want to welcome you. So good to have you on with us tonight. And I know that there are a number of women who are joining us tonight. And I want to welcome you as well for this live stream. I want to ask you a favor. If you're watching on Facebook, you can share this with your friends on Facebook, maybe start a watch party and invite some other people to join with you. Whatever you can do just to get the word out so that there are more people tuning in to this incredibly important conversation during this time. Tonight, we're going to focus on the topic of navigating stressful seasons in our marriages. And I know that for many of us, COVID-19 has created or brought to the surface a lot of stress in our relationships. And maybe even before we hit this pandemic, you were dealing with some stress. So this is going to be an important, timely topic for all of us tonight. And I'm really thrilled to have two incredibly wise men on this roundtable conversation tonight. Two men I count as friends and partners in ministry. And so I'm going to bring them in right now. And first of all, we're going to welcome in Bill Farrel. Bill is an author of a ton of books for men and marriages with his wife, Pam. And so, Bill, it's great to see you from all the way from California.
All the way from California. Hey, Kirk, it's great to see you. And I want to be the first to congratulate you on your new tan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It is, I didn't even have to go to California to get it. It looks amazing. That's right. And
thanks for inviting me in tonight, because I so appreciate what Promise Keepers Canada does and the way you guys have been holding up the mantle for men walking with Jesus and living their adventure. And it's been a privilege to be a part of it.
Thanks, Bill. And it's been great partnering with you. And we are also going to welcome in Neil Josephson at this time. Neil is from FamilyLife Canada and just an amazing ministry here in Canada who is having a tremendous impact in couples and families all across the country. Neil, it is great to see you, my friend.
I am so glad to be here. Thanks.
And so I want to just ask both of you a question before we get started, because we're kind of in the middle of this pandemic. And I want to know, has your wife ever cut your hair before?
Okay, let me answer because it's easy. Yeah, my wife cuts my hair every time I need a cut. It's easy. And yeah, it's terrific.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to say, Neil, I think you got the right idea. Like, it's simple, it's straightforward, it never gets messed up.
Yeah. I don't have many choices. I'm not like you guys. I don't have many choices. So how do you answer that question, Bill?
Yeah. Is your wife ever cut your hair?
It's interesting. When we were first married, I had a great big afro because it was back in the 80s when that was cool. And Pam would cut my hair all the time because we were on such a limited budget that it made sense. And then she hasn't cut my hair in 20 years, but she did this year.
That's amazing. And my wife's cut my hair twice now since this whole thing started, and she loves it. Well, that's not true. She really wishes that the barber would open up in town so she wouldn't have to do it anymore. But it's just one of those seasons, and it's a great exercise in trust in a marriage when you can ask your wife to cut your hair. The real exercise in trust is if she asked you to cut her hair. That's the real exercise in trust.
Just say no. Yeah,
Don't
just
do
say
it.
no.
Don't do it.
Yeah, she has girlfriends. Say no.
So, I think it's time to move on. Here's how things are going to work tonight for those of you who are tuning in. Neil and Bill and I are each going to take a few minutes to talk about one aspect of stress in marriage and looking at that area. And then after a few minutes of one of us talking, we're going to come back, have a bit of a roundtable conversation about that topic that the person just presented on. If you are watching tonight and you've got questions for us, we really want to encourage you to engage online, ask your questions in the Facebook feed or on YouTube. We have one of our staff members is monitoring that behind the scenes, and as many questions as we can interact with you on, we're going to do that tonight. So please feel free to ask those questions throughout the evening. And we also know that being a godly man isn't something that just happens in one night and 1 hour of a live stream. It's a continuous growth pattern for our lives. And so you're going to see throughout the night some little announcements scrolling on the bottom of your screen, just sharing with you some additional resources and some next steps that we've created specifically for this event. And these are just tools to help you continue to go further after tonight is over with. So you'll see that just scrolling across your screen as we go through the evening. Okay, we're going to get started tonight, and I want to ask Neil to lead off for us, and he's going to get the whole conversation started. So Bill and I are going to kind of step out of the conversation for the next few minutes and just let Neil speak to you tonight.
Well, and because I knew I was going first, maybe I'm going to take more of a overarching angle with regard to stress. I was thinking about all the individual things that stress is doing these days and maybe where it's playing out. But here's where I landed. And let me start with a quote. Our oldest son, Ben, is a volleyball coach. It's his career. And so I hear him talk about his sport a lot. And one of the phrases he uses is pressure bursts a pipe. It's one of his philosophies as a coach is to always be offensive and attack. And he's just convinced that's the way to do it. Because if you relentlessly pressure your opponent, you will expose their weaknesses. And then hopefully you can capitalize and perhaps win the game. So I got thinking about that, and I think it's true for him in his sport. I think it's true for us these days. I think stress is revealing a lot these days. And the stress goes up, the pressure goes up, and I think we're finding where our weak spots are. We're finding out where we're strong. See, I'm convinced that stress, it reveals. Stress doesn't really create anything. That's really important to grasp that point. Okay, so stress reveals things; it doesn't create things. Have you ever heard somebody, public figure, something goes sideways, and a public figure goes on TV and they apologize, and I've heard this phrase so many times. That's not who I am. Right? They're explaining, oh, this happened, but that's not who I am. And go, no, I'm pretty sure that was you on that video. I'm pretty sure that was you who did that. I'm pretty sure that was you. Yeah, I think what we got to contend with is every one of us, every man, every woman watching this program. I mean, we have this incredible mix of great goodness and the potential for goodness, godliness, righteousness, empathy, compassion, kindness. We have capacity for all that, but we also have this really broken side of us. The sinful side of us, to use a theological word, and so we can, that's us too, right? So when something goes bad, stress reveals something, and maybe this is going on right now in these days of sheltering or extra pressure, extra stress. It's revealing some weak spots in our life. And I don't want to brush them aside when I confront that and say, well, that's not who I am. Actually, that is who I am. It's not all that I am, and I have some really good strengths, and it's not who I aspire to be. But in that moment, if stress is revealed and burst the pipe in my life, so to speak, I got to confront the fact that, yeah, that's who I am. And here's what I need. Here's the two things. And then I'm going to wrap up with this. As I was thinking about this, here's what stress has reminded me of in these days. I need two things. I really need two things. I need God. I need God to strengthen my weak spots, to come in and give me what I don't have. If you're a Bible person, you know that Apostle Paul wrote so much of the New Testament that Christians follow and try to obey. And in chapter 7, I can so identify with this. He says, look, when I try not to do the bad, I end up doing it. And when I try to do the good, I fail to do it. And then he says, who can set me free? Who can set me free? Like the pressure's on, Paul says, and I keep doing things I don't want to do. Who can set me free? And his answer is Jesus Christ. So that's one thing stress reveals to me and has revealed to me in these 2 months of sheltering. It's like I really need to lean harder on God. And then the second thing is I think it's revealed to me how much I need healthy people in my life. I need some people around me, and I miss them. You know, if you're like me, sometimes you're not having your regular gatherings, you're not having your regular men's group, or I realize there's women watching women's group, or you can't, do in-person worship. So some of the things that have supported me and made me strong, I'm missing those things. And I look forward to getting back to some of those things, which then I think drives me back to my first thing, which I really need God to walk with me these days. So there you go. That's sort of an overarching, take can opener for this whole topic of stress. Stress is revealing things about us, our strengths, and some weak spots.
Yeah, that's really a great way to start, Neil. So let me ask you this question. At the best of times, a lot of guys, at least I do, we can struggle with communication. And you talk about how it's revealing our weak spots. And we might know that we've got the weak spots, but how do we begin to actually communicate and talk about those weak spots with our spouse in a meaningful, positive way?
Wow. Well, okay. Here's the paradox of communication. Is to sort it out, you actually have to communicate, right? So, I mean, it's like the double whammy. You say, well, how can I even talk with my spouse, my wife? You take it from the male perspective. How can I even talk to my wife about this because I don't communicate? So first of all, I think you're going to have to stretch a little bit. So if you're a person of few words, that's fine, but try to use a few more. If you find it hard to share your feelings, that's fine. You don't need to become somebody you're not, but you're going to have to be a little more transparent if you're going to get healthier. So I would say, baby steps, try to use a few more words, try to be a little more transparent. But this whole deal with communication, you can't get anywhere until you improve the communication. Now, one of the things I often coach guys on is you can't talk to your wife the way you talk to your buddies. Like, I think you have to, we know this, right? I mean, we have different vernacular. We have different postures with different people in our life. I bet you don't talk to your boss the way you talk to the person who reports to you. So I know too many guys who just like, hey, I can kid, I can tease, I can use sarcasm, or whatever. And I go home and I use the same language and it doesn't fly. So I think you need to communicate in a way that suits your spouse. And I would say the same thing to the women. They need to understand their guys' channels too. So there you go. Open up a little bit more, stretch yourself a little bit, and pay attention. Adapt yourself to who you're actually speaking to. In this case, your wife. Do not assume it's okay to talk to her like you do with the men at work or the buddies at the court.
Yeah, that's a good word. Bill, you want to jump in here with any thoughts in terms of what Neil was just talking about?
Well, Neil, I appreciated so much what you said, that stress reveals the stuff in our life. It doesn't create the stuff in our life. And I know in those areas that I know I'm not strong in, that the only way I can navigate those is through being intentional. Like I grew up in such a home of turmoil that I have instincts for creating turmoil. Like if I want to get into an argument with my wife, if I want to get into an escalating conversation, like it takes no skill at all to do that because I grew up around it. I know exactly how to do it. I've seen what irrational behavior looks like, and my wife grew up in an alcoholic family, so she can jump in and fuel it also. But if we want to do something different, we get very intentional. And when stress hits, all of those instincts want to come out. And all defense mechanisms we grew up with would want to come out. And we have found that the higher the stress is, the more often we need to meet. Because my wife would love it if I could just spontaneously jump in and talk through all the stuff of our life. And yet it gets overwhelming, and I start to defend myself rather than communicate.
Yeah.
But if I can set a meeting with her and say, hey, this is tough, so can we meet tomorrow morning and work through this? The intentional process just seems to do better, because if not, the stress just brings all that junk out and we're off and running.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant practical step for us to take as men, and as women who are listening to this as well in our marriages, because there's just that heated conversation that builds and builds sometimes, and just to be able to take that time out and just to say, hey, can we just like set a time and let's sit down and let's talk about this issue. I know that in talking to a lot of men and talking even to a lot of pastors, what Neil has said tonight is exactly the kind of thing that is happening. The stress of the current moment is just actually bringing to the surface things that already existed in the marriage relationship. And so, you know, you really have a choice in this moment in your marriage. You can choose to like dig your heels in and engage in the fight, or you can step back and go, no, this is actually revealing something to us. So how are we going to together resolve this issue? And not just for this moment. See, that's the other key. Sometimes we want to put a Band-Aid on the situation and just resolve it for now. But you didn't get into this kind of a emotional reaction overnight. There's a series of things that have happened. I was talking to one pastor who said to me that they're living with the reality of a lot of families right now where the kids were always the center of the home. The marriage kind of just was secondary, and the couple didn't even realize it until now when they're in this high stress situation. And this high stress situation has all of a sudden brought out the reality that we've lived with this, of the kids being the center of our world. And not that kids are bad, but you can do it to such a degree where your marriage becomes secondary, and there's all kinds of other habits that get formed that diminish your intimacy and your connection with each other as a couple. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So true. And can I just throw this word out? I just prompted to say it because, listen, if you're out there and you really have a really strong shame and guilt gland, and a lot of us do, you can hear this stuff and just, yeah, I'm screwing up and I'm this and that. I just want to tell you, I honestly, like if I was at home and both my spouse and I were working and we were trying to do homeschool and we were trying to share one or two devices and we were parenting full time, man, I would go nuts. Like, if you're feeling stressed, you deserve to feel stressed. Like you're not a failure as a dad or a husband or a man or a woman. These are tough times. So be gracious to yourself, be gracious to one another, and be honest about what's going on. We still have to navigate it. But I know sometimes, you know, it's easy when those of us teach, you know, inadvertently we make everybody feel guilty and ashamed and whatever. If you got struggles, be honest. But if you're having struggles right now or extra stress right now, you're not a bad person.
Yeah, you're probably pretty much like every other person on your block right now if you're facing some of those stresses. And you know, I certainly I think that alone is an important thing, even just to acknowledge that as a couple, to actually look at each other and say, you know what, like there's a reason why we're feeling this way, and there are circumstances that are out of our control, and it is creating stress in our marriage. And that's just our reality right now. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean we hate each other or that we want this to end. It's just, this is our reality right now. Bill, anything you want to add to that?
And I would add to Neil's thoughts. There are no experts in marriage. That there's only people on a journey. And I would say to every couple that's watching, there has never been a couple like you before. and there's never going to be a couple like you before. And we do all this training on how marriage and family is supposed to work because we want to help equip you. But the reality is you need to figure out what the best version of you is, not compare yourself to Neil or to Kirk or myself or anything else that you hear. You need to just ask the question, how can we be the best us?
Right.
Because God is a unique creator. Just as you're a unique individual, you're a unique couple. And you just have to figure out how you work as a couple, not compare yourself to everybody else who's giving you the studies.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to study when your kids are screaming and the bills need paid.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think that just to kind of try and bring this thought together, I think it's important for us to step back from the emotion of the moment and just to be able to say, we are living in a high stress moment. We are faced with all kinds of difficulties, but we're in this together. And don't look at each other as the enemy, but look at each other as we're teammates in this.
Yep.
And so let's communicate well. Let's figure out together how to navigate our way through the stress and maybe even build some new rhythms into our marriage that'll help us in the seasons when we're not in the stressful moments. And take this as a possible gift even to your marriage relationship to draw you closer. I know for me, the seasons of highest stress have become some of the greatest gifts to my marriage because they have been the moments where, some of the rough edges in my own life have been chipped off, and God has just used those things to bring us back together in greater unity than what we were before the stress hit. But it's a matter of pressing into it and being able to have grace for each other in the moment that you're in, and keep learning and growing together as a couple. I want to say thank you to those of you who are commenting on social media. Keep those comments coming. Keep asking some questions. If you've got questions, we'd love to dialogue with you around those. I'm going to turn it over to Bill right now, and he's going to share a few thoughts with us. So Bill, take it away.
Well, thank you. One of the things I want to add to this discussion is stress is not always a bad thing. Because if you're experiencing stress in your marriage, you're experiencing stress in your pursuit right now, it probably means you're making progress. And one of the ways this shows up, like one of the reasons that every marriage experiences stress is we all tend to marry what we don't have. And it starts with the fact that we're male and female. So as men, we get attracted to women, and we think, oh, this is going to be like having one of my buddies in my life who looks way better than all their guy friends. But then you get married and you realize, oh no, I married more than a buddy. I married a woman, and she has an approach to life that's just different than yours. Like one of the best ways to illustrate it is that there are more connections between the two sides of your wife's brain than there are us guys. And it happened because when us guys were in the womb, there's a testosterone bath that took place. It severed some of the connections between the two sides of the brain, and it sent out a signal for other connections not to develop. And as a result, we as men, we tend to have a simpler approach to things in life. Like we narrow things down. We deal with the one thing at a time, one problem at a time. And there's great value in that, but it's not complete. So when we think about getting married, we tend to marry what we don't have. So we married this beautiful lady who's got the ability to connect way more things in her mind than we can. So she connects the way she feels and what she's thinking and what she said. She connects all of the beautiful artistic sides of life with the emotional sides of life, with the rational sides of life, and it is all connected. And so when she talks to you about something important in life, she emotions, and she can bring in the implications, and she can bring in the thoughts and the feelings, and et cetera, et cetera. And in addition to the fact that you marry somebody with a different gender that you have, you also tend to marry traits that you sense are missing in your life. So if you're a very spontaneous individual, very creative individual, you will marry somebody who's more methodical and who's a planner. And if you are somebody who is very rational and you like things to connect from A to B to C, you will generally marry someone you don't have. So we all marry these gaps in our life, and we bring our spouse in because, as guys, because she has that kind of the secret to life that we don't have. And when everything is in balance, it's a beautiful thing. But you know as well as I do, life doesn't stay in balance. And so when it goes out of balance and stress hits, suddenly now the things that we greatly appreciated about one another become sources of irritation. Like for Pam and I right now, part of this whole shutdown and part of the stress of our life is I have parents who are in their 90s. And with the way we have to be careful, they need a lot of care, they need a lot of oversight. And the help that I used to bring in to relieve us, I haven't felt safe bringing that help in during this shutdown time. So we have spent a lot of time in a travel trailer that I set up as an office in my parents' backyard so I could work and be on site to help them. Well, my wife is very creative and very spontaneous, and I tend to be more methodical about how I do things. And now we are doing a lot of planning and a lot of operation, and we're doing a lot of life together. And when you start asking the question, whose way is better? There's no answer to that question. Because there's times my way's better, there's times her way's better. And when we get to spend time working in different locations, we can just run with our way and it doesn't load stress up on us. But now that we're having to coordinate at a very intense level, it has kind of revealed the fact that we do things very differently. And I know in my heart, I lived a much bigger life because I'm married to Pam than I would have on my own. But there are days that doesn't feel blessing because we marry what we don't have. And so part of the challenge when you're under stress, because when we get under stress, we all want to go to our sweet spot. And we want to make more and more life work is we train ourselves to recognize what is it that I love about my spouse that is now driving me crazy? And how can I get back to a place where I appreciate it rather than feel pressure from it? And one of the areas that shows up for Pam and I also right now is Pam is very extroverted, so she likes lots of touch points with lots of people. And I'm more of an introvert, so I like a few touch points with significant people in my life. Well, again, who's going to set the pace for the day with how many people we connect with when we're both in the same space all of the time, fighting for resources? So what I would say to all of us is this is not a science. It is an art, like it's a form of art, trying to figure out when stress is high, how do you take the differences that drew you to one another and coordinate them in a way that you appreciate the differences rather than just feel pressure under the expectations of the other individual.
Bill, thank you very much. That is some really great thoughts for us to chew on a little bit. So, Neil, how do we start to try to appreciate those differences when we're in those high stress moments?
Well, Bill started off talking a little bit about his family background and his wife's family background. We need to understand that we enter marriage and our script is already rolling. And whether we're conscious of it or not, we usually kind of go, oh, I know, I'll add you to my story. And that doesn't always fit. You need to say, we're writing a new story. So I got my habits and my family, a simple thing. I come from a Scandinavian background. We celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve, right? And when I tell some people that, they go nuts. Like, no, you can't celebrate Christmas Eve. And what about Santa? And it's like, so who's right or wrong? So that would be the first thing is get off the who's right or wrong train. And just say, this is my background. Yeah. This is what I'm used to. This is what, at the moment, makes me feel comfortable. And but I want to weave a new life together with you. So I need to receive what you bring. So get off the right, wrong train as soon as you can. There's a lot of different ways to be healthy. The health is the goal, not this or that. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah. And for those of you who are Christians and you're watching the broadcast tonight, you'll understand this language. The Bible talks about how we are all made in the image of God. And it says that he made us male and female in his image. And one of the real aha moments for me was understanding that my wife and I are both made in the image of God, but we both express the image of God in different ways. So it's not a matter of she's wrong, I'm right, or I'm wrong, she's right. It's a matter of we're both actually coming and trying to express the image of God that is in us. And so to actually appreciate that image bearer that other person is and how they are bringing it to the table in the marriage relationship. Mauricio, I'm going to ask you to put that question back on the screen from Derek a few minutes ago, because this is a really pertinent question in the time that we're living in right now. And his question is, do you have any suggestions for those who are getting married during a dangerous time? It can be incredibly nerve-wracking for couples who are engaged on wedding planning and what to expect. And when things are not what we expected, like, you know, how do you navigate this? We're hoping to get married, but we're not really sure if it's going to happen. And we've already put all kinds of money out. How do we navigate these kinds of situations? Bill, you want to jump in on this one to start?
Well, the first thing I would say to anybody who's engaged right now is thank God that you're engaged right now, because you are getting a preview of marriage that is going to prepare you better than probably the rest of us were prepared. Because life is full of the unexpected. And I know the first year of my marriage, like I went into it thinking, man, I found the woman of my dream. She is amazing. She is godly. She's a lot of fun to be with. And then the surprises started hitting. And there were a whole lot of things that happened that first year that were very unexpected. And the thing I wish somebody had told me sooner in life was that our emotions always follow our decisions. So if you want to develop an atmosphere in your home that's emotionally satisfying for both of you, learn how to make decisions together. And when Pam and I finally grasped that and we started making decisions together about what Neil was saying, what kind of life do we want to live? It transformed the emotional atmosphere of our home. And those who are engaged right now, they are forced to make a lot of hard decisions. And if you can figure out those decisions together, you're going to create an emotional atmosphere in your relationship that's going to prepare you well for the journey ahead. So I know it's frustrating. Mm-hmm. I know it's disappointing, but it's a great privilege.
Yeah. Neil, you want to jump in on that last question that Bill was just talking about?
We're doing premarital preparation with a couple that's still scheduled to get married in the first week of July. And so obviously, but they've got a plan to really do a low scale wedding, and he's happy because he would have just eloped anyhow. But there's a lot of loss for her because she had expectations, right? And
yep.
So back to Bill's point, what a profound moment where he needs to go. This matters to her. Like, she's hurting right now. So I'm going, yippee. Yeah. It's simple. But she's brokenhearted about certain losses. I gotta try that on for her. And back to Bill's point, this is what life is full of. Like marriage is full of these moments where you need to put yourself in your partner's shoes and rejoice with them or be sad with them. And that's what marriage is built out of. It's also revealing too. I mean, it's often said, you've probably heard this, we love weddings in North America more than we actually love marriages. And I think there could be that revealing moment too. Like, people love the party and getting married, and then afterwards are less into it. Derek, you and other people like you are getting exposed to what marriage is really about. Compromise, adjusting, celebrating what you can, letting go the rest. You know, just what you're right, Bill. I should have just said what Bill said.
No, I appreciate your words, because again, like, we know, because we've been married for a while, we know that this is a journey of the unexpected. And so we can look back and realize that, you know, our personal growth, the fact that we kept growing throughout the years because we didn't know what to expect. And we can look back and say some of the unexpected things have become great memories. Yeah. Some of the unexpected things are very difficult. But when you're young and in love, you don't see all that. It has to be force-fed it to you. And that's why, people who are trying to figure it out right now, they will look back and say, wow, we didn't realize how much we learned and how much we grew and how well this prepared us.
Yeah. Rebecca, you've asked a great question. How do we pray for our finances as we prepare for marriage? And I think that is one of the all-time questions that every couple I know have asked themselves. How do we deal with finances as we're going into our marriage relationship? And I'll say this, I think, how do you pray for it? You simply come together as a couple. This is a great opportunity for you to begin to build a regular rhythm of praying together as a couple, if you're not already doing that. And just to go to God and ask him straight out and say, God, you've promised to provide for all of our needs, and we don't really know how all of this is going to work out, but we are asking you to fulfill your promise and keep your promises to us. And I've watched, I have, our two oldest boys got married last year. And those boys, I've watched them in the last year where they've had different challenges in their finances and things like that. And just to watch how God has provided for them along the way in some very surprising ways sometimes. It's been such a thrill because you can see they're experiencing the reality of God's provision in their life without mom or dad writing a check, which is like a double win for me as a dad. I don't have to write the check, and they get to experience God providing for them.
Way to be transparent there, Kirk. Hey, can I just tell you this? When this started a couple months ago, and the Lord just really impressed on me this day. I just got this phrase, this day. And of course, it's part of the prayer Jesus taught his followers to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. And two things. It's corporate. It's us. Let's just give me this day what I want or need. I mean, we need to pray for corporately. But boy, I think that's one of the ways to pray right now is give us this day. We'll trust you for tomorrow. But Lord, would you provide this day what we need? So that would be another thing I'd think about.
Great word. Okay, I'm going to share for a few minutes here on, another topic. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when stress is high, certainly for us as men, we often like to escape from reality because the stress is so high. Sometimes we kind of bury ourselves in video games. I think right now, many men are facing a bit of a perfect storm in their life. Now, there are guys I know who are bored because you can't go out the way you used to go out. There are guys who are maybe really exhausted right now because you're dealing with working longer hours, balancing the kids being at home. You and your wife are both working from home, and kids are running around all over the place. And it's just a zoo right now, and you're exhausted working longer hours than you really wanted to be during this time. Maybe you spend your whole day staring at Zoom, and you're just exhausted from staring at Zoom all day long. Those are realities right now. And then you have the combined pressures of home, money, work, and then your marriage is stressed in the middle of all this. And it's really a perfect storm. And one of the things I've seen in a lot of men is boredom or exhaustion, and then you combine it with stress in marriage. It's a perfect storm of temptation for us as men when it comes to the whole topic of pornography. Porn for a lot of guys becomes one of those places that's our escape from reality. It kind of gives us a space where we feel alive and wanted as a man. And since COVID began, traffic on porn sites has gone through the roof. I know that in Spain, there was a 61% increase of traffic on one porn site alone, just in the country of Spain. And some of us might think to ourselves, well, what's the big deal? I'm not hurting anybody. I'm by myself. It's late at night. My wife's already asleep. It's like, it's innocent. What's the big deal? So here's the problem. The use of porn raises hormone levels inside your body as a man, and you actually become chemically attached to what you're seeing on the screen. And as Christians, that's a problem for us for many reasons. But one of the big reasons it's a problem is because we know that the Bible says we're to be one with our spouse. And how can we be one with our spouse when we are actually literally chemically bonded with multiple women that we're viewing on the screen, as well as trying to be bonded with our spouse? You see, the stressful situation that we find ourselves in, it's already trying to create a wedge in your relationship. And porn just ends up creating even greater distance between you and your spouse. You are meant to be connected with her, and now you're also attached to the porn. So let me just make a couple of suggestions, and I'm going to bring Neil and Bill back in. Really practically, go to bed at the same time as your wife. Make a habit of, I'm not going to stay up later than her, because when you're tired and you're stressed and you're alone, it's just this great temptation that's going to hit you. So help to remove the temptation from your own life and just make the habit of going to bed at the same time as your spouse does. And then second, have some honest communication, maybe not about the porn. Maybe you're not ready to talk about, hey, I've been looking at porn, but just have some honest conversation about what are some of the things that are working against us in our marriage right now? What are some of the things that are trying to divide us, that we need to just name those things and try to figure out how we're going to navigate our way around those issues in our marriage right now. And just build a plan to be intentional with each other, investing towards not just sexual intimacy, but true fullness of intimacy emotionally and spiritually with each other each and every day. I want to bring Bill and Neil back into the conversation right now. And I just want to ask you guys this question, because I know that a lot of guys, when we are stressed out, we live in a space where we really sometimes we have higher expectations sexually for our spouse, because we want a place to just kind of release our stress. And that's not always helpful in our marriages and for our marriages. So how do we pursue healthy sexual intimacy during really stressful seasons in a marriage? Neil, I'll let you start off with this.
One of the first things we spoke about on this broadcast was communication, right? Like, we're going to have to get to the place where we can honestly say, this is the way I feel. This is what I'd like. Can this work? Have a real grown-up conversation. Now, it's difficult in the area of sexuality because it's something that means a lot to us. And because, we come from a Christian worldview. God created us male and female. So somehow my sexual identity is part of my God-given reality. So when I'm struggling in my sexual relationship with my spouse, it attacks my identity. Like, there's a lot at stake, right? It's not just, I'd like to have some pleasure. I mean, it's about my identity. Am I loved? Am I lovable? There's a lot of things at stake, and also for my wife. So it's difficult to have a real honest conversation. So if a lot of couples know how to say they're sad, a lot of couples know how to say I'm mad at you, a lot of couples need to know how to say you're not enough for me, but that's not productive. Like, how does that lead you to any good place? So I think to find language where you can honestly say, this is the way I feel, this is what I need. And here's the key that'll help. Start from the position that your spouse would like to feel sexually close to you, just like you want to feel sexually close to them. Like, if you assume that they want to withhold sexual intimacy and they want to make your life hell, I mean, you're going to have a confrontational thing. But assume that your partner wants to have a healthy sexual relationship just like you do, but there's some things in between. So start to have the honest conversation about, this is what it is, whether it's frequency or what you do, and listen to your partner.
Yeah, that's good. Bill, you want to add anything to this? Bill, you there?
Yeah, the first thing I would say to guys is we need to come at this without a lot of guilt. Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep, keep going.
Can you hear? Nod your head if you can hear me. Okay, so I would
Yeah, we might be having some technical. That is a
Say
beautiful.
to them,
Sorry, Bill, you're kind of stuck there. We got a picture of you like kissing the screen or something.
rather than, because the reality is God has made us passionate people. Like as men, oh boy.
It's okay.
Isn't that nice? Did I come back?
Yeah, you're back now.
I'm going to keep talking as if it repaired itself. So as men, we're very passionate, and I believe we were designed to have enough. So we were designed to have enough passion for our careers, enough passion for our wives, enough passion for making a difference in our community, and we tend to get it all focused on the sexual arena. And we want our sex lives to be great. Our wives, they would like to have great sex lives too, but they don't know how to keep up with the frequency that we would like to have. And so I appreciate what Neil says, we need to have an adult conversation, and it needs to include, hey, I've got enough passion in my soul to build a career. I've got enough passion in my soul to raise a family, and I've got enough passion in my soul to love you. And I want us to figure out how to run with this passion. And the other thing I would say to couples who have a hard time starting the conversation, that let somebody else lead the conversation. Like Pam and I wrote a book called Red Hot Monogamy because we wanted to give couples a way to have the conversation without them having to come up with all the questions and all the awkward discussions. Yeah. And I know Gary, the book Sheet Music is another great conversation starter to help couples lead through this discussion.
Yeah, those are, and I've read both of those books, and Red Hot Monogamy is a great book. Highly encourage couples to work through it together as a couple. When we worked through it as a couple, we just read one chapter a week and spent some time talking about it together, so we could learn together and grow together in our intimacy with each other. I think that it's also true that we need to, certainly from a guy's perspective, we need to always be increasing our awareness around how are we investing emotionally into our spouse. Because if your spouse is in a stressed out situation and you're just, all you're thinking about is, hey, how can we have sex tonight? But you haven't been any real support to her along the way, you're not going to have a productive time of sexual intimacy with each other. You're just building some resentment in her. But if you can be serving her, investing in her life, loving her throughout the day, throughout the week, you are creating that safe place of being able to grow in your sexual intimacy with each other in the days ahead.
Can I just connect a couple things? So talking about the stress piece, I know in my relationship with Cheryl, and we've shared this and taught it publicly, and then a lot of people come up to us afterwards and say, yeah, I get that. So let me just share it with you. In our relationship, when I'm stressed, I want to make love. It helps me relax. It helps me deal with my stress. I just want to escape for a little while, be with her. When she's stressed, she wants to deal with the stress. And when it's all calmed down, then she wants to make love. And so it's been a source of endless frustration for us. But, and it's still the way we're wired up. We still deal with that. But we've gotten past the point where one of us is right and one of us is wrong. You got to navigate it. And it really helps when you start to say, no, I'm stressed too, but this is the way I deal with it. The other thing I wanted to pass on to is under stress. I read this stat that the average person, these numbers are close. The average person has 4,500 thoughts a day or something like that. An elite athlete has about 1,600. And it's not because they're dumb jocks. It's because they have this incredible capacity to be very, very focused. And I know this about myself. When I'm under pressure for a lot of things, I can get very, very focused, which has been productive for me. But imagine, if those numbers are right, imagine the 2,900 thoughts I had to ditch to get focused, and how many of those were about my wife, or could have been about my wife, or like you pointed out, Kirk, trying to pay attention to what her needs are and how her moods are. Well, in times of stress and I'm trying to pay the bills and keep my business above water, man, a lot of us could be dealing with this, man. We've really got the blinkers on, and we're missing a lot of stuff. So let's be humble about that.
Yeah, that's good. Bill, you want to add anything into that?
And the other thing I would add is, especially for men, if we can learn the skill of recreational conversation and just practice it once or twice a week. Like as men, we get overwhelmed. Like I gotta talk to my wife all the time, every day. I gotta keep with her, and then now we've added more stress to our life. But this need in our wife's life is so basic that if once or twice a week you just take time to talk, just for the purpose of talking, guys, there's no point to it. There's nothing to solve. There's nothing to figure out. You are just taking time talking back and forth. It is such a basic need in her life. It will keep the relationship soft. In the same way that, like, anytime your wife says, "Hey, I'd like to make love now," you're like, "Okay." She will have the same kind of response when you say, "Hey, let's just talk. Doesn't matter what we talk about. Let's just talk about anything you want to talk about." You'll be amazed the atmosphere in your home. And it doesn't have to be a day thing, but if you make it an every week thing, it will help.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Great advice. Absolutely. I had a couple questions that came into me separately from any of our Facebook or YouTube friends. So if you're online right now and you're watching, you want to submit a question, we'd love to be able to answer your questions. So here's a scenario. Husband and wife are both working at home now because of COVID, and kids are running around the house because they're not in school. They're both trying to find a quiet place to work. And there's some tension that's happening because there are a lot of women who are in a space where they are saying, my husband is saying, I get the quietest spot in the house to work because my job's more important. And so you can work over in this space where, the kids are going to be running around during the Zoom call that you're on today. And so it's just creating some tension for couples trying to navigate this whole work from home, kids home. How do we deal with this? So Neil, do you have any advice for couples who are kind of living in this space right now?
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, God bless you. These are difficult things. You're not a bad couple. You're not a bad family. These are difficult things. Limited resources that you have to share, limited space that you have to make work. Man, those are legitimate challenges that are going to test your ability to put the other person first, humble yourself, take the second place. I mean, these are great and godly and frankly wonderful marriage attributes. It's like, no, honey, you take the best place. See, I think that's a biblical thing. And Jesus taught that. So, but boy, when you're feeling the pressure of it, that's a hard thing to do. Maybe you need a compromise. I'll have it half the time. You have it half the time. Here's a great question to ask your spouse. How are you feeling about the way we're distributing parenting and workload and whatever, rather than assume things? And when you see stress building up in your spouse, don't assume that she's mad at you. She's just feeling stressed. Why don't you just say, hey, what's going on? What can we do? Can we do anything? And maybe the solution right now is, we can't do anything until life circumstances change. We can do this, that, and the next thing. But the fact is there's too many of us fighting over one computer in one room. Some of the stress isn't going to go away for a little while.
Yeah, that's good. And I just think learning to practice the idea of putting the other person first, and as a husband, especially, if you're a Christian man, Christian husband, learning to sacrifice yourself for the sake of your wife, like we're called to as men. Not only are you following Jesus when you do that, but you are doing such a great investment into your marriage and into your family when you live like that, and you will reap the benefits and the joy of a happier home and a happier relationship as you sacrifice yourself for the sake of your spouse being able to thrive during this time. Doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's always going to be simple, but it's incredibly important. What about the idea of when we're in stressful situations? Yeah, go for it, Bill. Yeah.
I want to just ditto what Neil said, but I also want to encourage couples to be thankful that they're having these problems.
Okay.
Because if you're trying to juggle 2 jobs during this time right now, and you have kids that are healthy enough to interrupt you, that's a lot better than not having work at all.
Right.
And having kids that are not doing well. So in the midst of like all that stuff Neil said, just stop and be thankful that at least we have 2 jobs to argue over.
So good.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good wisdom. And what about in stressful seasons? What about the idea of how much should we bring other couples into our stress? Like just to confide in friends about what's going on in our marriage or in our relationship. Where is there a line, or is there a line in terms of how much we should confide in others about the stress in our marriage? Neil, you want to take that one, start?
It seems like I'm going first all the time, so I'll try to be briefer. You know what? I think it's so important to have in our lives couples who are for us. The distinction is it's easy to have guys who are for me, and Cheryl has gals that are for her. I mean, that's what your friends are for. Your friends are like, hey, you're right, buddy, and I'm on your side. But that can tend to be, that can drive you apart because all the guys are saying, yeah, you should feel angry. You should feel upset. And her friends are telling her the same thing. You need some couples who go, boy, that sounds really hard. Can we help you? Can we pray for you? Can we? Yeah. So now here's the trick, though. Before the stress hits, you need to build those relationships before the stress hits. It's a little tough to look for them right now, but I bet they're around you. But let's think about this going forward too. Can you build that kind of friendship, or can you be that kind of a friend to another couple? I think it's really important to build those into your marriage.
Yeah, that's good. Bill, you want to add anything to that?
I would just add the amount you can share with other couples is based on the other couples, because there are some people in life you can trust, and there's some people in life you shouldn't reveal a whole lot to. So if you are, I agree with Neil. We were not meant to do life alone. So having couples that know you and you're doing life together and you can share back and forth, but the deep stuff you only want to share with couples that you know you can trust.
Right.
Yeah, and you might get 2 or 3 of those in your lifetime, and when you find them, treasure them.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too. As you find those people, find people who are not going to always agree with you, but the people who are going to help sharpen you. So they'll empathize when you need empathy. They'll cry with you when you need someone to cry with you. But when you need someone to look you eyeball to eyeball and say, like, Kirk, you got to man up as a husband right now. They'll have the courage to look you eyeball to eyeball and say, you got to man up as a husband. And so those, you need those kinds of people that if you're going to share things with your friends, those are the kinds of people that you need to surround yourself with. Hey, I want to just say thank you to Bill. And Bill looks like he's trying to talk, but
and can I add one thing, Kirk?
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to add, Kirk, like the other advantage of having other couples involved in your journey is there are some things that we need to hear from men that our wives can't really say to us. And there's things that our wives need to hear from ladies that we really can't say to them. And when you have a group of couples in your life that you really do, you interact on a regular basis, a lot of those needs get addressed that you can't address in just meetings as between you and your spouse.
Yeah. Great point.
Very true.
Hey, everybody who's watching, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Just a couple of quick things as we're coming close to the end of our hour together. You will have seen some announcements scrolling on your screen. If you go to promisekeepers.ca/next when the broadcast is done, that will give you some information about some online small groups that are happening to help some of you who want to continue to process some of these things in your marriage. We also have a group starting up for guys who might be struggling with pornography right now. And so you can check those things out. If you're able to make a donation, go to promisekeepers.ca. You'll help us to be able to cover costs for doing more of these kinds of online events during this season. And we would just really appreciate that. There's one more question that's come in. So I want to honor Henry's question that's just coming in here. He's asking this question. Can you talk about expectations? I believe most conflicts come from not expressing what we expect and to listen to what it is my wife expects. So Bill, you want to speak to this issue first about expectations?
Yeah, I think getting in the habit of talking about expectations without an agenda is one of the best skills you can develop in your marriage. Because often we share expectations as if they are demands. That I know how life should be, that's why I expect this, and you just need to give into this and submit to it. Where the real secret of marriage is what Neil said earlier, that when you decide together who you're going to be as a couple, that's a mixture of my expectations and a mixture of her expectations. And we have talked about it enough that we now have our expectations. If you can get to that point, all of those points of your marriage are going to work well. All the areas where you have one expectation and she has another and you don't resolve them, those are probably going to be points of conflict going forward.
Yeah, good word. Neil, you want to add anything on that?
That's a great question from was it Henry?
Yeah.
Expectations. I mean, we have them, but boy, when they're unspoken, it's like walking through a landmine. You just step on this unspoken expectation, and I have them. My wife has them, and so to take them from unspoken to spoken, and then try to be as realistic as you can about them, because we have some unrealistic expectations too.
Yeah, we do. Well, Neil and Bill, I want to say thank you so much for the time together tonight. We treasure at Promise Keepers Canada, we treasure the partnership we have with both of you guys, and the opportunity to invest in men's lives together is a real privilege. And so I want to bless both of you and just, God's best for you during this season in ministry and in your families. And to all of our viewers tonight, I just, again, want to say thank you for taking time to join us. We hope this has been helpful. If you want to continue on the conversation, keep asking questions in the Facebook Live feed or on YouTube, and we'll be glad to interact with you as a staff around some of those questions that you have about marriage and navigating this season of stress in your marriage. With that, I just want to say God bless you to everybody. Have a great night, and thanks again for joining us. Take care.